You know, had you got crepuscular black, it would have been a bit lighter. Who cares? Yeah, but we have these knowledge. We have knowledge of things that people don't really need to understand. So, there was a man at the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam entered the masjid. And have you ever seen this? This is something very common, you know, in the world you live in. You know, when you click on YouTube, you see the most views. The more views someone has, the greater there must, you know, there's a correlation between views you receive and how moronic the person is that's made the video. Who has the most subscriptions? Does anyone know? Huh? Who? What'd you say? No, isn't it PewDiePie? Did he overtake him? See, there's a new one. If you were to look up these people and see, I've even lost track there. If you look up all these, the top 10 most subscribed, you will not believe that people actually watch this. That people are actually interested in this. So the Prophet, imagine Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam walks into the masjid. What should happen? فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. Isn't that right? People should rush to them, move towards them. Why? They are the meaning of everything. Rasulullah moves in and there's a group of people, they're sitting around a knowledgeable man. So the Prophet asks them. So could you imagine the scene? These people are around the man and the Prophet standing to ask them. As if he's an outsider. You know what's going on. You know, could you imagine? Could you imagine the scene? Just have that in your head. These guys are interested. And the Prophet says, who is this man that you people are so interested in? They said, Ya Rasulullah. They know he's the Prophet. The hadith actually says, Ya Rasulullah. They don't say, Ya Muhammad. They're not, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. They're not Arab that don't know. They're semi. They're not all the way there. Because they refer to him as a messenger of God. They said, Innahu allama. That this man is an allama. You know that term, you hear this term all the time. Someone says allama. And you know, that automatically means someone is scholarly. So the Prophet says, he doesn't say, what does he know? He asks him, وَمَا الْعَلَّامَ? What is a'lama? What is it? You know, because you're the one that used this term. What is this allama? And then they said, this man knows the ancestry of the Arabs. You know, Allah, this is good when you want to show the position of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam, who they're from. But Msibi, if he goes to the Khulafa, there's going to be a lot of missed connections. It's going to be sit there, it's like making a phone call in the desert. Nothing's going to be catching on. There's going to be a lot of misses. You're even going to have trouble finding out who the mother is, let alone the father. So anyway, he says, I know the ancestry of the Arabs. And he has the knowledge of poetry from the days of Jahiliyyah. And they call this man Allama. So the Prophet gives a simple response for what they've said. He said, this is knowledge that does not harm one that does not know it, and does not benefit one that knows it. So in other words, this knowledge, if you never ever know it, is going to affect your life. And if you know it has no benefit for you. You're never going to be called up one day and say, all right, can you give me the ancestry of the Arabs and relive for me some tunes of the days of yore? Tell me how in the days of ignorance, how they used to sing to Hubal and Lata Manat. I want to hear those tunes. No one's really going to ask you this. People don't even want to read poetry that is meaningful, let alone poetry that is not. So then the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says to them that knowledge is of three types here. This is a type of knowledge. Remember the original hadith I'm talking about? I just wanted just to keep you in. We're talking about acquired knowledge. We're talking about the types of people of knowledge and the types of knowledge. So I don't want to get anyone lost. The types of knowledge here, because I've gone right into the middle, and then we'll move back out of the circle. He says this knowledge is of three types. Ayatun muhkama, okay? Which is, ayatun muhkama is a decisive sign that leads to God. It's decisive. Something that it's vivid. There's no doubt in it. That's the first type of knowledge. Ayatun muhkama. The second one, he says, faridatun adila. Why? Because it's natural, once I know there is a God, there is a master, what are my obligations to this master? What's my duty? You know, when you have heard people use the term, I want to kill time. People that want to kill time should be killing something else. People that say, I want to kill time, what are you killing time for? Do you have time to kill? Or when a child says, I'm bored, that's a child. But when you hear an adult say, I'm bored, how do they get bored? How does someone get bored? How do you get bored? Have you fully finished your obligations between you and your Creator? It's a long journey. If Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wassalamu alayh was grasping onto his beard and was on the floor, he says that I saw him, that he would roll like one that his soul is departing from his body. And he would say what? He would let out what? A sigh of pain, that he says, how long is the journey ahead and how small or little is the provision. And then someone comes along and says to you, oh, I'm bored. You don't have much provision. You should be acquiring more provision for the hereafter. Finally, he says, the third thing he says, وَسُنَّةٌ قَائِمَةٌ. So the types of knowledge are these: signs that lead you to God, your obligations to God, and the recommended acts. The traditions that or recommendations that are from Allah or His Messenger. This is the type of knowledge. But who are the people of knowledge? The three types of people when it comes to knowledge. The first one, the Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, فَعَالِمٌ رَبَّانِي. The first one is a scholar, and we mention here Rabbani, of the divine, someone that is pertaining to what is divine, to what is heavenly. So not just anyone, we have a tendency when we say alim, any one of our fuqaha, our ulama, we call ulama, they are ulama. Yes, they are ulama. They are scholars. But this isn't the meaning of alim Rabbani. Alim Rabbani is someone, and even, sometimes you'll have opinions where some will say alim Rabbani. They will acquire this, that this is only the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. Some will say it's other prophets. Some will even say it's of the righteous ones that Allah has chosen. As we know, for example, where even Allah Azza wa Jalla uses a whole surah in the Quran about Luqman al-Hakim, who was not a prophet, but whose wise sayings the Imams used to tell people. They teach them the teachings of Luqman. And that's how wise he was. That's how knowledgeable Luqman al-Hakim was. The first one, he says, فَعَالِمٌ رَبَّانِي. The second, وَمُتَعَلِّمٌ عَلَى سَبِيلِ نَجَاتٍ. The second one is a seeker of knowledge who's on the way to deliverance. In other words, moving towards what? To be saved. Because if I follow the alim Rabbani, I'm going towards salvation. Because he's going to give me the way through. The path is with him. My dear brothers and sisters, what I'm trying to say is when it comes to acquiring knowledge, as a believer, every believer goes to paradise, there's no doubt. It's how you get there. For example, I could be traveling from here to Western Australia. I could be going business class in an Airbus Or I could be, for example, in one of the residence. Imagine you have a bed, or you can private jet. And then you got someone, imagine someone on a billy cart, or someone that's been dragged by their legs towards Western Australia. Eventually they get to their destination. Before they get there, they're broken to pieces. So these people will deliver you. They'll show you how to get there without a shadow of doubt, without a problem. Not to just say, I'm a believer, I'll enter paradise. No, I'm not happy getting even 2 slaps. I want to get in first class. That's what my attitude should be. This is the way I should be thinking. Then finally, he mentions the third type. He says, وَهَمَجٌ رُعَاء أَتْبَاعُ كُلِّ نَاعِقٍ. So the third one he mentions, he says, هَمَجٌ رُعَاء. You probably heard this a lot. What we would call the riffraff of society. The hamaj, I don't know if you've seen those little things, they're not mosquitoes, they're like bugs. They're always flying around the derriere of the sheep, with the tail of the sheep. You see those? That's what hamaj is. So these types of things. And then when we say this, hamaj ru'ah, meaning common folk, okay, the plebs or the laymen. Then he mentions atba'u kulli na'iq, that they follow who? Every caller. Whoever calls them, they follow. Anyone calls to Islam, see, this is how people end up following. The people that have nothing, no information, a David Koresh pops up and they all follow him. Someone pops up and says, I'm the Mehdi. See, 100 people just run behind him and say, all right, this must be the Mehdi. You get people that, you've seen those videos. In Iraq, every second someone jumps up and says that they're the harbinger of the Imam al-Hujjah, and people follow them. They've seen those, I don't know if you've seen those videos, people send them around, the people that are doing latam, they're rapping to it. They're another group of those. They're actually doing rap songs, the kids are singing it, everyone's rapping to it. And this is because they're doing it for the harbinger of the Imam al-Hujjah, someone that's bringing good tidings that the Imam's coming. So people just follow anything. You don't believe me? Take a look at Donald Trump and all the MAGA hats. All these people follow him. He's like a messiah to them. They follow any caller that calls them in any direction. So the Imam says that they follow any caller, يَمِيلُونَ مَعْ كُلِّ رِيحٍ. In other words, they go with any breeze. So whichever way they follow, whatever cult turns up, they follow. Now, the problem is, the people that don't belong to the first 2 groups, 2 types of people, will always end up in the third type. The ones that haven't bothered to acquire knowledge, don't worry, someone's going to fill you up with knowledge. That's why you meet people, honestly. I meet people, sometimes they're in university and they're studying and they think they're intellectual. And they will tell you things. Ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. They actually believe this. You know how many people I've spoken to in my life? I've met people where I ask them, is there another intelligent being other than the human? And they say yes. They say yes. And I said, all right, like what? And then people always mention one of the 4 ape groups. Harambe, because, we all like him. The silverback, so yeah, that's one. I will just put him aside because, he's a crowd favourite. People like him. Or they'll mention the chimpanzee or the orangutan. They never mention the other ape, the gibbon, but no one ever knows about that. It's one of those that's just been thrown out the window. But they always mention these apes. They're intelligent. You say, how are they intelligent? They're intelligent. I've seen them, for example, I watch a video. Have you seen the video with the orangutan using the saw? Have you seen that? Puts its legs down and starts cutting. So you can cut with a saw. They can use tools. So they're intelligent. Did you know if animals were intelligent, we're all dead? There's no 2 ways about it. Don't even think. If animals, could you imagine the ants, the total weight of ants in the world? If you got all the ants in the world and weighed them, and you got all the humans in the world and weighed them, ants outweigh us by 14 times. Do you imagine that? Do you know what they would do to us if they were intelligent? What, you think humans whaling. 1 second, look at what they've done to marine life. Look how they just go hunting, they cull everything, they don't care what they kill. You know, you go to some countries in the Middle East, you don't even see a bird because they've killed them all off. Could you imagine these animals had intelligence? Because we're not strong. If you think we're strong, we're not even close. Do you imagine like a sloth was a bit quicker and had intelligence? With those, have you seen those claws on the sloth? What they'd actually do to you? Did you imagine harpy eagles had intelligence? Well, all these animals, imagine they had intelligence, what they'd actually do. Do you imagine like great whites just sit in the water and they'd wait for you? And they'd come as teams and they'd knock your boats into the water. These people have absolutely no intelligence. They think another animal has intelligence. The reason they've fallen here is because they didn't belong to the first two groups. They followed the third group, the Hamaj. So these people, they seek their knowledge. The knowledge doesn't give them any benefit. Not the knowledge that actually protects them. In another hadith, the Imam Abi Abdullah As-Sadiq alayhi salam, one of the narrators says that he mentions that the people are three. يَغْدُ النَّاسَ عَلَى ثَلَاثَةِ أَصْنَافٍ. The first one he says alim, as we mentioned. The second he says muta'allim. And the final one he says وَغُثَاء. See, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alim. Once again, we're using the same group. Alim wa muta'allim. The first one we said hamajun ru'a. This time the Imam says ghutha. What is ghutha? See, I look up these words to get the best meaning. What is it that it actually means? I'll give you an example what ghutha is. Have you ever seen when someone's boiling broth, bones or something? Have you seen that layer of froth that stinks? That's at the top. That greasy froth, that's what ghutha is. That stuff you scoop and you throw, that froth, that's useless, that's what ghutha is. So the Imam says they're basically things you throw out. They're not even useful. They smell bad. There's no use for these third types of people. Then the Imam tells you who the ulama are. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, فَنَحْنُ الْعُلَمَاء. We, Ahlul Bayt, are the ulama. وَشِيعَتُنَا الْمُتَعَلِّمُونَ وَسَائِرُ النَّاسِ غُثَاء. So the Imam's already told you. First, Amir al-Mu'mineen tells you the types of people who comes to knowledge. Imam al-Sadiq salawatullah alayhi tells you who they are. The ulama are the Imams. The ones that follow them are the followers, the Shia, the ones that are the muta'allimun. The leftovers are everyone else that's not a follower of Ahlul Bayt. This is where you end up. But it is, honestly, when you're sitting there, you know, the video my brother sent me today, it was yesterday. The guy, this is a real video. The guy's actually talking and he's trying to sound logical. And when you listen to it, like you listen to it over and over again, and you say, how? How can someone listen to this and find it reasonable? He says that Hajar ibn Uday, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, was a companion of Rasulullah. He's a Sahabi. He was a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he was a companion of Al-Hasan, salawatullah alayhim ajma'in. Okay? This companion, he says he threw something, I think, a little rocks or pebbles at who? At Sa'd ibn Ziyad ibn Abi. He threw pebbles at Ziyad ibn Abi. Do you know why they call Ziyad ibn Abi Ziyad ibn Abi? Just a history lesson. Ziyad ibn Abi means Ziyad, the son of his father. Why do you think they call him Ziyad, the son of his father? Huh? Because you'll be playing Guess Who for a long time and you would have dropped them all and not worked out which one it was. You're not going to know who the father of Ziyad is. And these are a funny story too. that he once paid off Abu Sufyan to say that Abu Sufyan's his father. So Abu Sufyan would agree to be the father of Ziyad. Do you imagine? It's a real case of who is my daddy. He's going to pay someone to be his daddy. So then when Abu Sufyan says, okay, the money's good enough, I'll be your father. And honestly, he went through the garbage pile. He picked the most rotting corpse and said, this can be my father. So when he did this, one of the poets said, I've never heard of Abu Sufyan having a son called Ziyad. So then Abu Sufyan sent him some of the proceeds. So then the poet looked at him and said, it's as if I see Abu Sufyan standing before me. It just changes automatically, because when the money comes in, they all change. Even when Aisha sent Ziyad a letter, he didn't like people calling him Ziyad ibn Abi. So she said, to Ziyad from his mother, Aisha. So she knew how to actually talk to him so he doesn't get upset. However, this Sheikh that's speaking calls him Ziyad ibn Abi. He doesn't sugarcoat it. But he says Hijr ibn Uday was insolent because he's the Amir. So they sent him to Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, and Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan needs to fix the situation. He can't allow this insolence to take place. This is how he's talking. He goes, so in order to fix it, he ordered for Hijr to have his head cut off, because you can't insult an Amir. And you just think, what just happened there? Yes, he's going to cut his head off. Once he cuts his head off, what's going to happen? He says, Aisha sends him a letter, says, how can you kill this Sahabi? He says, Ya Ummah. And he says, Undhuru ila al-adab. He's look at the akhlaq of Muawiyah. He refers to it as Ummah. Funny thing is, you know who killed Aisha? It's not our history. It's their history. Aisha was killed by Muawiyah. He killed his own mother. Matricide. So anyway. So he says to her, leave the situation between me and Hijr. We'll let God sort out a situation. He'll fix it, And I just think these guys just allowed murder. And not just murder of a Sahabi. Their religion's Sahaba. Like their religion's all about Sahaba. If you have a lecture about the Prophet, the whole lecture will be about the companions. They won't talk about the Prophet. The whole lecture will be about the companions of the Prophet. Muawiyah killed a Sahabi. He killed it, Ya Alam. And they accept this, and this is normal. This is the type of understanding that you'll be left with in the end. And that's why the Imam refers this to smelly scum that you have on top of the dish. Now, what should I acquire? Let's look at the narrations. I'll give you one narration and then we'll move to the next type of knowledge. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Man ta'allama hadithain ithnain. Whoever learns 2 hadith. How many? 2. Think about it. You all know 2 hadith. Everyone knows at least 2 hadith. We say them. Sometimes we don't realize they're hadith, but we say them. You could say something, for example, Aliyun ma'al haqq wal haqqu ma'ali. How many people know this hadith? Everyone knows it. People know a hadith like this. أنت مني بمنزلة يا علي أنت مني بمنزلة هارون and Musa. Ali is with the truth is with Ali. Oh Ali, you are from me like Aaron was to Moses. There's a lot of hadith we know. 2 hadith. The Messenger of Allah says, من تعلم حديثين اثنين ينفع بهما نفسه. He benefits from them. Who first? Charity begins where? At home. ينفع بهما نفسه أو. See, he doesn't say wa. He gives أو. Or. يعلمها غيره فينتفع بهما. So he teaches it to someone else and that other person benefits from these 2 hadith. كان خيرا له من عبادة 60 سنة. My dear brothers and sisters, I want you to think about this very closely. Worship for 60 years. What's worship? 60 years you could have went to Hajj 60 times. In 60 years you fasted 60 Shahr Ramadans. In 60 years, say you were praying Salat al-Layl for 60 years. In 60 years you were reciting the Quran. Worship of 60 years. 2 hadith. Why? Why is it like that? Because when I spread the knowledge, why does Imam Alim al-Muhammed, al-Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida salawatullah wa salam, why does he say to Abu Salt, he says, Rahimallah man ahya amrana. Why does he command him to revive the commandments of Ahlul Bayt? He said because if, it's a long hadith basis, because if you teach the people and they learn from our teachings, they will follow us. The people will follow us. Our teachings, when you give a hadith, people say, where did you get this from? طبعا al-bashar we're talking about. The Hamaj are Hamaj. The Hamaj is still going to be kicking stones in Arafah every year. Don't worry about that. Alright. But is all knowledge acquired? Can I study for every part of knowledge? No. In fact, what I just mentioned is your general knowledge is knowledge that you acquire, but there is knowledge that is given. No one has what we call ilm dhati, except Allah Azza wa Jal. Everyone has a form of the ilm that we call a form of iktisab, ilm that's acquired, whether it's through study or through mawhiba, it's granted or gifted by Allah Azza wa Jal. But Allah Azza wa Jal is the source of knowledge. Allah is the knowledge. Allah has that knowledge. Now, the second type of knowledge is difficult to absorb if you've been brainwashed. If you've been indoctrinated, you're not going to listen to the second type of knowledge. But we have evidence that there is another type of knowledge that cannot be gained from books, that cannot be gained through experience in life. And we have evidence, 2 of these verses in Surah Yusuf. One where Allah Azza wa Jal mentions Yaqub, he says, وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ لِمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. He says he is a possessor of Yaqub, of knowledge that we have taught him. He has a certain type of knowledge. This is with regard when he sends his sons to get the grain and to get the, to get the supplies from Egypt. When he sends them, he's not sending them out of ignorance. He knows where they are going. He's someone with a he's a prophet of God. He's Rasulullah. He's the son of Ishaq. He's the grandson of Abraham. When he's sending his children, Allah says he possesses knowledge, but most people do not know. Most people are unaware of this type of knowledge that's within. This kind of information is not acquired from reading and studying. This is not something you hear on the grapevine. It's not like that. And even his son Yusuf alayhi salam, when the people in the prisoners ask him to tell them about their dreams, he says to them, in the verse he says, قَالَ لَا يَأْتِيكُمَا طَعَامٌ تُرْزَقَانِهِ إِلَّا نَبَّأْتُكُمَا بِتَأْوِيلِهِ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَأْتِيَكُمَا ذَلِكُمَا مِمَّا عَلَّمَنِي رَبِّي. That before I even tell you what the dreams are about, let me introduce myself. He says, not only will I tell you, he says, not only will I tell you what the meanings of the dreams are, but I'm going to tell you that if food that is going to be given to you while you are in the prison, the whole time I will tell you your menu is for the rest of your life. Anything's come to you, I will tell you. Could you imagine the whole time they were getting the same food every day? But anyway, no. Just because it's a farha, I made that joke. But otherwise, the thing is, he's allowing them to know what? This is something that Allah has taught me. Even once they say Umar ibn al-Khattab wanted to know about this story I was told about this, and generally with these stories, they are true stories because people used to question the knowledge of the Prophet and the Ummah. So Umar al-Khattab said to Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, he said, they say that you can say what people are going to do before they do. You know this knowledge. Tell me what I will eat today. Challenges him. So the Imam says, today you will eat tharid. It's like a stew, meat stew. And Omar says, I swear to God, I will not eat today. And I'll expose him as a liar. But these people, I don't know, where it's like when Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad wants to challenge Maytham al-Tammar and ask him, how will you die? Because I'm going to do differently. Qudi al-Amr, as Yusuf said. Once it's done, it's done. That's when they told Amir al-Mu'mineen, kill Abdul Rahman before he kills you. He says to them, Aqtulu qatili, do I kill the one that's going to kill me? I'm telling you, he's going to kill me. So Umar ibn Khattab says, listen, I'm not going to eat anything. So he leaves the outskirts of the city to avoid. As he leaves, he gets lost. And he arrives near a hut. And he says to these people, can I stay the night? They said, you're our guest, so we have to feed you. And he says, I don't want to eat. He says, but I'll make food for you. They say, okay, we like a tharid, that's what we want to eat. And then he says, well, I'm not going to eat it. So he makes it for them. And then he puts the food for them to eat. And they say, where's your bowl? Aren't you going to eat? He said, no, I'm not hungry. So then the man of the house assumes that this man has poisoned the food. So he pulls his sword out and he puts it to the throat of Omar and says, eat. Because you poisoned the food. So he ate the food because he had no choice. And obviously we know his military prowess. It's not like he was going to pull his sword out. His sword is glued to the scabbard. It's never come out. And they admit to this, so it's not... so I don't want someone to come up and say, oh my God, this person's talking ta'ifi. It's not ta'ifi, it's something they admit to. The Baladhuri, in his Tariq, he's a Sunni, not a Shia. He says Umar ran in Uhud. He actually says that. He took off. This is not something from us. They say that. So let them attack him in his grave somewhere because he's the one talking like this. So anyway, even Nabi Musa alayhi salam, the Imam says when he received the tablets, he had a thought in his head that all the knowledge that is needed is in these tablets. So Allah Azza wa Jal sent Al-Khidr because of this reason. And he says about him, فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. He, Allah Azza wa Jal, mentions that we taught him knowledge. Knowledge that could not be acquired, to show Musa alayhi salam about this knowledge that exists. The reason we bring this is so you can understand that when the Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi Zain al-Abidin hujjatullah ala al-khalq, when he says to Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam that anti alima, he says غير معلم, that you are a scholar, you are alima. You're not someone that has been taught. He does not mean that Rasulullah did not teach her. He does not mean that Amir al-Mu'mineen didn't teach her. He does not mean that she didn't learn in life. But the knowledge that you have is alam ladunni. Just like the knowledge Al-Khidr has. You're not just anyone. You are someone with knowledge. You are a possessor of knowledge. You are someone that has knowledge that is divine. I was actually watching a lecture today for the late scholar Sheikh Hassan al-Qurani, rahmatullah alayh, and he mentioned a few points in it. One of them, he said that there is a lot of narrations that would lead, or discussion through the scholars that would lead us to know that even during the Hadith al-Kisa, while the Prophet was with Fatima and Al-Hasan Hussein and Amir al-Mu'mineen, that in her womb she carried Sayyida Zainab. He actually says this. He says in Hadith al-Kisa that she was present within the womb. Another thing, the reason I mention Sheikh Hussein, because he's not someone that has extremist views. He's someone that's very moderate. So for him to have this kind of opinion lets you know. Secondly, he mentions that it's also a narration that he says that she was named like Al-Hasan al-Hussein were named, you know, when they were born, where Fatima alayhi salam asked Amir al-Mu'mineen to name them. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen said, I will not precede Rasulullah in naming them. Then Rasulullah said, I would not precede Allah in naming them. And like that, he mentions that also she was named by Allah Azza wa Jal. She was, like I mentioned, the granddaughter of Rasulullah. She was the daughter of the third child of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima alayhi as-salam. And she was born, according to the narrations, either 5 years after the Hijrah or 6 years after the Hijrah. So at the martyrdom of Rasulullah, she would have been 5 years old or 6 years old, is the contention. She was also born around the same year of the battle of Khandaq or Al-Ahzab, the third battle in Islam. Okay. The other thing is, with her knowledge, you need to remember she was raised in the city of knowledge. أنا مدينة العلم وعلي بابها. So the city of knowledge, she was raised in there to also have this knowledge. And they were known, even the enemies of Ahl al-Bayt, during the time in Damascus, when they turned towards, when Imam Zain al-Abidin wanted to speak, they said, إنه من أهل بيت إنه من أهل بيت قد زقوا العلم زقا. You know, we say you know, when someone carries or takes buckets loads, or even when a bird is drinking, that's what we're talking about, that they've gulped in the knowledge, that they've consumed the knowledge, they have so much knowledge. Even when we look at the knowledge of Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, and this knowledge, this isn't something that, as I mentioned before, Al-Khidr, and I mentioned Luqman, even Imam al-Sadiq salawatullah alayhi, when he reads Ziyarat Abu al-Fadl Abbas, he doesn't mention Abu al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam as someone that was fighting and was just, generally when we talk, we're led to believe he was a warrior that was fighting. The Imam says in the Ziyarah, وَأَنَّكَ مَضَيْتَ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ مِّنْ أَمْرِكَ, that you weren't someone that was just doing something, you were someone that had insight, you had foresight. In other words, you had knowledge about what you were doing. Someone that had, and you could see in his stances and the way that he would act. Now finally, when we look at what a alim is not someone that has knowledge, it's someone that acts upon the knowledge. So you can say someone has knowledge, هذا عالم. No, you say هذا عنده معلومات أو دارس, he has some information or he studied. A alim is someone that you see the alim on them. What do we call someone that has a lot of information but doesn't use that information? What do we call them? What does the Quran call them? مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ولم يحملوها كمثل. Allah says it. The one that has the knowledge and doesn't act upon this knowledge, Allah Azza wa Jal says he is the example of this person like a donkey. You see some people that go study. There are people that actually go study in the house. They study in the seminary. They won't wear their turban. They study just to attack scholars, to show them I'm more knowledgeable. That's all his job is. He studies. I remember one person, he was studying, doesn't wear a turban, and he would sit in there, he goes to me, women should be allowed to wear makeup, and I was thinking, what's this guy been studying? Comes out with all these opinions just to say, now he's been there for a while, just to say I have knowledge, that I've gained all this information. And finally, Allah, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, Al-ilmu nurun yaqdhifuhu Allah fi qalbi man yasha. There was one more hadith, but the time's up along these lines, which is too long, and I've been up here for so long. I'll give you a break before the salah. I do apologize for the length of the discussion. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal because it's a celebration, that's why, otherwise I'll murder your ears. Allah Azza wa Jal, may Allah Azza wa Jal grant you all the opportunity to visit the shrine of Sayyida Zainab in Damascus and in Egypt. Inshallah, Allah rids us of the tyrants that rule in our lands and allows us to go freely and visit these shrines. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal for His intercession on the Day of Judgment. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal for all those that are present tonight and all those that are present at any majlis where they celebrate Sayyida Zainab, that no one leaves with even a speck that they will be questioned about, not punished, even questioned about in the hereafter from when they die. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to hasten the reappearance of our master Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan Al-Mehdi arwahuna fida. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك صلواتك عليه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والأرواح موتانا وموتاكم رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.